Hey everyone, welcome back to Night English Radio. Whether you're winding down after work, taking a walk, or just looking for something to listen to while you relax, we're glad you're here. Tonight, we're talking about something that sounds simple but gets surprisingly complicated when you become an adult. Making friends.
Especially when you're living abroad. When you're a kid, making friends can happen in about 30 seconds. You sit next to someone at school, you both like the same game, and suddenly you're spending every afternoon together.
Exactly. Nobody sits there thinking, I wonder if we have enough shared values to build a meaningful friendship. You just ask, do you want to play?
And somehow, as adults, we lose that confidence.
Or maybe we just become more aware of everything that could go wrong. You meet someone interesting, have a great conversation, and then suddenly you're thinking, was that too much? Should I message them? Would that be weird? Do they actually want to see me again?
That sounds very familiar.
I think it gets even more complicated abroad because you're already dealing with a different culture. You might not know how friendly people are expected to be, how quickly people become friends, or even what counts as a real invitation.
And sometimes you start wondering whether your English is the problem.
Right? You have a nice conversation with someone, but then nothing happens afterward and you think, maybe I wasn't interested enough. Maybe my English was too awkward.
When actually the other person might be thinking exactly the same thing.
That's the part I find interesting. Maybe making friends as an adult isn't really about finding the perfect person. Maybe it's about understanding how adult friendships actually develop.
And that can look very different from what we remember from childhood.
So let's start there. Why is making friends so much harder as an adult? I mean, adults meet new people all the time. At work, at the gym, in classes, at restaurants, through friends. There are probably more opportunities than we realize.
There are, but meeting people and becoming friends with them are two completely different things.
What's the difference?
I think adults have more boundaries around their time. When you're a student, you might see the same people for 6 or 7 hours every day. You have lunch together, classes together, breaks together. Friendship gets a lot of free opportunities.
Whereas adults might see a coworker for 8 hours, but that doesn't necessarily mean they'll ever see each other outside work.
Exactly. And that repeated contact is more important than people realize. A lot of friendships grow simply because you keep running into the same person.
That reminds me of something that happened to me when I was abroad. I met a guy at a language exchange and we immediately got along. We talked about travel, music, food, all the usual things. At the end, we said, we should hang out sometime.
Classic.
Very classic. And then neither of us did anything.
Why not?
Honestly, I don't know. I liked him. I thought he liked me. But somehow that sentence felt like the end of the conversation instead of the beginning of a plan.
That's because we should hang out sometime is often more of an invitation to continue the relationship than an actual plan.
So it's a signal?
Yeah, it can mean I enjoyed talking to you and I'm open to seeing you again. But somebody still has to turn that into an actual invitation.
Like, are you free Saturday?
Exactly. That's when things become real.
And that tiny step can feel surprisingly uncomfortable.
Because now there's a possibility of rejection. If you say, we should hang out sometime, the other person can smile and agree without committing to anything. But if you say, are you free Saturday afternoon? They have to give you an actual answer.
I think adults are much more sensitive to that little risk. When you're a kid, if someone says no, you just go ask someone else.
Right. Adults have more social history. They're more aware of awkwardness, rejection, and the possibility of making someone uncomfortable.
Which can lead to this strange situation where two people genuinely like each other, but neither person makes the next move.
I've actually done that. I met someone at a photography class, and we talked every week for about a month. We always had something to talk about, and eventually she said, we should get coffee sometime.
And did you?
No,
Why?
because I thought she was just being friendly.
But she literally suggested coffee.
I know. Looking back, it was obvious, but at the time, I didn't want to assume too much.
That's funny because she might have been thinking the same thing.
Exactly. We were both being polite, and somehow politeness almost stopped the friendship from happening.
So what finally happened?
The class ended. We both realized we weren't going to see each other anymore, so I finally sent her a message. I said, "Hey, you mentioned coffee a while ago. Are you still up for it?"
And?
She replied in about 30 seconds and said, "Absolutely. I thought you weren't interested."
There it is.
We both thought the other person wasn't interested.
That might be one of the weirdest things about adult friendship. Sometimes nobody is rejecting anybody. Everyone is just waiting.
Exactly. And I think that's especially important when you're abroad because you may assume that you need to wait for locals to invite you into their social circle.
But they may be waiting for you too.
Yes, especially if they know you're new to the country. They might not want to make assumptions about what you're comfortable with.
So maybe being friendly isn't enough. At some point, someone has to be a little more specific.
I think so. We should hang out sometime is nice, but are you free Thursday is what actually creates a friendship opportunity.
That's a useful distinction. The first one opens the door. The second one actually walks through it.
And honestly, that little bit of vulnerability is probably unavoidable. Adult friendship requires you to risk looking slightly awkward.
Which is uncomfortable.
Very.
But maybe that's also why it feels more meaningful when it works.
There is another thing that makes friendship abroad interesting, though. Even after you make that first connection, you still have to figure out what being friends actually means in that culture.
Yeah, I think this is where people can get confused. In some English-speaking countries, people can seem incredibly friendly almost immediately.
They can. Someone you've known for 10 minutes might say, "You should come over sometime," or "Let's grab a drink next week."
And if you're not used to that, you might think, "Wow, I've made a friend."
Maybe, but not necessarily.
That was something I had to learn. I remember meeting an American guy at a party. We talked for maybe 20 minutes, and he invited me to a group dinner the following week.
Sounds promising.
It was. We had a great time. Everyone was welcoming, and I really enjoyed myself, but afterward, I didn't hear from him for several weeks.
Did you think you had done something wrong?
A little. I wondered if I had misunderstood the invitation or said something strange.
I think that happens because people sometimes confuse friendliness with closeness.
So when someone says we should definitely hang out, they might genuinely mean it, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're already close friends.
Exactly. The warmth can be real without the relationship being deep yet.
That's an important distinction.
And I think there's a cultural element here. In some English-speaking environments, being openly friendly with strangers is considered normal. You can joke with someone, compliment them, invite them somewhere, and still keep your deeper personal life separate.
So friendliness can be a kind of social openness.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm inviting you into my inner circle.
That actually explains a lot. Because if you come from a culture where invitations are more carefully chosen, you might interpret a casual invitation as a stronger signal than the other person intended.
Exactly. And the opposite can happen too. You might think someone is being superficial because they're friendly with everyone when actually they're just expressing warmth in a culturally normal way.
I've noticed that in restaurants too. A server might joke with you and ask about your day, and you might think, wow, this person is incredibly friendly.
And they may be, but that friendliness is part of how they interact socially or professionally. It doesn't automatically mean you're going to exchange phone numbers.
Right, although if the server asks me to come to their barbecue, I might take that more seriously.
Fair enough.
But then how does a casual connection actually become a real friendship?
I think the biggest word is consistency.
Seeing someone repeatedly?
Exactly. You go from, I met this person, to, I keep seeing this person. Then, eventually, you become part of each other's routine.
That sounds almost boring.
It is a little boring.
But in a good way?
Definitely. Think about a gym, a sports club, a language class, a volunteer group, or even a weekly trivia night. You don't have to force a deep conversation every time. You just keep showing up,
And over time, the conversations naturally become more personal.
right? The first week, you talk about the class. A few weeks later, you talk about work. Then, someone mentions a relationship problem, a family story, a trip they're planning. The friendship gets deeper almost without anyone announcing it.
That feels very different from the idea that you need to have an amazing first conversation.
Exactly. I think people put too much pressure on the first meeting. They think, we have to click immediately.
When sometimes the person you eventually become close friends with is someone you initially thought was just okay.
Absolutely. One of my closest friends is someone I barely noticed when we first met. We were in the same volunteer group, and for the first few weeks, we mostly just said hello.
What changed?
Nothing dramatic. We kept ending up on the same projects. We started getting coffee after the meetings. Eventually, we discovered that we had the same sense of humor.
So the friendship wasn't created by one big moment.
No, it was built through small, repeated moments.
That might actually be the bigger lesson about making friends abroad. We often think friendship comes from chemistry.
But chemistry helps. Repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity creates trust.
And trust makes it easier to be yourself.
Exactly. You don't have to perform anymore. You don't have to think about whether your English sounds natural or whether you're saying the right thing. You already know the other person.
That's probably especially valuable for language learners. At first, every conversation can feel like a performance.
Yeah, you're thinking about grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, everything. But when you see the same person regularly, your attention slowly shifts away from your English and toward the actual relationship.
And maybe that's when your English starts improving too.
I think so. You begin picking up their little expressions, their humor, the way they tell stories. You're learning the language through the relationship rather than studying the relationship through the language.
I like that.
And it takes time.
Which is probably the part people don't want to hear.
But it's also reassuring. If you've been abroad for a few months and you don't have a huge group of close friends yet, that doesn't necessarily mean you're doing something wrong.
You might just be in the middle of the process.
Exactly. You're collecting small connections. Some disappear, some stay casual, and a few slowly become something deeper.
So maybe making friends abroad is less about finding your new best friend and more about giving relationships enough chances to develop.
Yeah, the first step might be as simple as talking to someone. The second is suggesting coffee. The third might be showing up again next week.
And not overthinking every interaction,
That's probably the hardest part.
especially for adults.
We're very good at turning a simple invitation into a 5-minute internal debate.
Should I text them?
Is this too soon?
Did they actually mean it?
Maybe I should wait until they message first.
And suddenly 3 months have passed.
Exactly.
But I think there's something encouraging about realizing that friendship abroad doesn't require perfect English, perfect confidence, or some magical personality.
It mostly requires opportunities, repetition, and the willingness to make a small move sometimes.
And understanding that cultural differences can change the meaning of friendliness. Someone being warm doesn't necessarily mean you're close, and someone being reserved doesn't necessarily mean they dislike you.
That's such an important point. People have different ways of showing interest, trust, and affection. Sometimes you have to watch what happens over time rather than judging the relationship from one conversation.
So if you're living abroad right now and you're thinking, why am I meeting people but not making real friends? Maybe give yourself a little time.
And maybe choose one person you genuinely enjoyed talking to Ask them to do something specific, not, we should hang out sometime.
More like, are you free for coffee this Saturday?
Exactly.
It might feel a little awkward.
That's okay.
They might say no,
They might.
but they might also say yes.
And if they do, you've created another small moment, then another, and eventually you might look back and realize that the friendship didn't really begin with one big conversation.
It began with someone simply deciding to show up again.
I think that's a pretty good way to think about adult friendship.
Thanks for spending part of your evening with us.
We hope tonight's conversation gave you a different way to look at making friends abroad, especially if you're doing it in a second language.
Keep listening, keep meeting people, and don't be afraid to make the first small move.
And remember, you don't have to turn every new person into a close friend. Sometimes a small connection is enough for today.
And sometimes, if you keep showing up, that small connection becomes something much bigger.
That's how a lot of friendships begin.
We'll see you next time on Night English Radio.
Take care, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.